On Wednesday, the 2nd of July 2025, the UK Parliament voted 385 to 26 to prescribe Palestine Action, meaning that not only is it a criminal offence to be part of this organisation, it's also a criminal offence to vocalise support of it. Following these events, I'm joined today by Spokesperson for Palestine Action, Luxx, to discuss this news. Thank you for joining us, Luxx.
Thank you so much for having me and being supportive as we continue into these strange territories.
Now, of course, we here in PalPulse, Pulse of Palestine, we do support what you guys do. But the question on everybody's mind, now that it's likely that you will be proscribed and Palestine Action will be a proscribed organisation from Saturday, probably, do you condemn Palestine Action?
Oh, that's going to be the question now, isn't it? It's the first time I've been asked it, and I'm sure it won't be the last. What I have to say about this is that movements always keep moving and shape-shifting. And the very essence of Palestine Action can't really be taken away from the people. What we've represented and what we've shown is possible and can't be taken away from the people. And I certainly will not ever condemn a people's integrity to intervene in genocide.
I mean, that's a good answer as we could expect. But for our audience, for their benefit, could you just quickly summarize what Palestine Action is and what the main mission is? Because there's obviously, with the coverage that's going on from the mainstream media and from the establishment, they do tend to lie about what people who support Palestinian or the Palestinian cause or oppose genocide do.
Palestine Action is a direct action network. So it has been functioning for 5 years now. And the first principle is that we bypass the government because the government is not going to stop sending weapons to Israel. That has been very clear. It has been very clear for over 100 years that is not going to be their MO. So what direct action does is it goes directly to the source. So we say, okay, everybody's out there chanting for an end to arms sales to Israel. Why are we asking for that? Why don't we just go and stop the flow of arms? If we know where the factories are, if we know where they're being produced, you go to the factory itself and you make it impossible for it to operate and export those weapons to the Zionist entity. And that's what Palestine Action has done for 5 years. And we've closed down permanently 2 of their main factories. We have forced them to abandon their headquarters, and they've lost over £1 billion in contracts due to us intervening to economically isolate them and shrink their pool of quality resources. And it's worked, and that's why we're in this position.
So, as I mentioned in my introduction, the vote occurred as of filming yesterday in the House of Commons. It's occurring in the House of Lords as we speak. 385 MPs voted to ban Palestine Action, as opposed to 26 who voted against. What is your reaction to that vote?
Well, I must say, I always expected it to go through Commons. The only vote that we may have ever had would have been in Labour, but not this Labour iteration, not a Labour Party that is, 50% of its MPs backed by the Israeli lobby. So with that, alongside the Tory vote, alongside reform, we only ever really had the independents who were going to be on our side. Do the numbers surprise me? I think it surprised a lot of people. I think it has been a wake-up call for a lot of people to understand the dynamics that are happening in Parliament and who is against us as a collective Palestine movement and who isn't. And to really see those numbers laid out is quite stark and is quite frightening for people, I think. So I did expect it always to go through Parliament. I am alarmed by the numbers. I am alarmed by the numbers, not just for us, just for what this means in the long term.
And what do you think it means in the long term for Palestine Action, for those who want to do direct action, or for the Palestine Solidarity movement as a whole?
Well, it's completely lowering the threshold of what constitutes terrorism. I mean, the terrorism legislation in the first place is purposely very vague so that this can happen. The point of terrorism legislation was so that it can be used, expanded in different ways, and so that it could be enacted in quite arbitrary ways that suited the ideology of the government of the time. So this has always been terrorism legislation. However, what we're now seeing is that threshold being lowered right in front of everybody's eyes. So it was lowered 4 years ago, and a precedent was set at that point that meant such actions could have been considered terrorism. Now we're seeing it in front of everybody's eyes. It's not happening under the table anymore. What I believe this means for the wider movement and for direct action is, if they'll come for us, they'll come for you next. What it's saying is that the UK will not accept resistance if it compromises their foreign interests, if it compromises their military outpost, if it compromises their trade agreements, that their citizens don't matter to them. What matters to them is keeping that relationship with the Zionist entity. That is stronger to them. Now, what we've seen through the cases that have taken place over the past few years is that the government are treating the Israeli government as if they are the domestic government. And that is a major, major, major issue, and something that should frighten everybody as well. So what this means isn't that we stop, it's that we stay strategic, it's that we stay together, it's that we remember that we can outmaneuver them, we do, we resist, and whatever that looks like, this feeling that we have fostered together as a movement in these past 20 months won't go away.
What does it mean? Sorry, you mentioned that 4 years ago that the threshold was lowered for what counts as terrorism. Could you just expand on that a little bit?
Yes, so in 2021, I believe it was, there was an amendment to the Terrorism Act which brought that threshold down. But that happened when there was barely any members of parliament in Commons. It happened very under the table. It happened very quietly. Nobody really spotted that that was happening. And it didn't really seem to apply to anybody at the time. Nobody had any vast interest in it. But what we're seeing now is the fallout of that. Because what that allowed them to do was use terrorism legislation against the Filton 18, who are 18 activists who allegedly are connected with an action that happened at Elbit Systems site in Filton. And those 18 were arrested under counterterrorism powers. And they're being held under counterterrorism powers on remand. Some of them might be on remand for up to 2 years. And with that in mind, now that we are facing an official prescription, now that this is going to be a banned organisation and that it's not going to exist in this form anymore, it's really important for me to get across that we've been treated like terrorists still for the past year. Since August 2024, they have been using counter-terrorism powers against us anyway. This just seals the deal for them. This just makes it very, very official. They have smashed through people's doors, smashed up their homes, held people in solitary confinement, incommunicado. People just disappear. We don't know where they've gone. This has been happening to us this entire time. I was arrested in September in my home for being supposedly a member of an organisation that was not banned. It would not have been illegal for me to be a member, even if there was membership for Palestine Action, and for other such things that were absolutely not illegal. What they arrested me for would only be legal if it was a banned organisation. So you can see that they already were enacting these powers as if we were banned.
Wow. I mean, the fact that they've come for you in that way is quite alarming. But in terms of the way they've been coming at you using terrorism laws, why or what explains their preference to continue their ties with the Zionist entity and to impose these draconian measures upon their own citizens as opposed to simply complying with international law?
I mean, I believe that we all know, and I'm sure all of your viewers would agree, Israel functions as a military outpost for the UK state and for the US state. And they're not willing to compromise that, despite the fact that the majority of citizens have expressed very clearly that they want this arms embargo to happen. So understanding how little this government has your back is something that was very clear to a lot of people prior, but there are many people who are only just coming to realize that this government is not here to save your soul. This government is not here to back your moral conscience. This government is here for its trade deals. This government is interested in its military arrangements. And we are just happening to live under their power, whatever that means. And that's what we have to resist. We have to empower ourselves to understand that we don't have to just surrender and do as we're told and take the position of our government. As British citizens, I genuinely believe that we have a responsibility and a duty to intervene from the heart of empire in this way. The proximity to evil that is being enacted is too close for us to ignore because they have chosen a policy that they believe is stronger than their commitment to their subjects.
A hearing is set to take place on Friday, which is tomorrow from filming, to block the proscription. Given the fact that recently the courts in the UK recently ruled in favour of continuing the sales of F-35 parts to the genocidal state of Israel, is Palestine Action, are you optimistic about the outcome from that hearing?
What I would say is I really believe in our arguments. I really believe we have a strong case. I think it's incredibly important that we take the Home Secretary to court over this, not just for our dignity, but for the dignity of the entire Palestine movement here in the UK, that we don't take this on our knees, that we stand up and we fight it. I think, to me, that is the most important part of tomorrow, to show that you may not understand Yvette Cooper, who you came to battle with. This is a very intelligent, very strong, very steadfast movement, very learned movement, who come from a long history of resistance and who have learned from the Palestinian people about how to keep fighting. And I think that's what tomorrow represents for me.
Yvette Cooper, our Home Secretary, has famously or infamously allegedly taken hundreds of thousands of pounds in donations or the such from Israel lobbies or the Israel lobby. And it seems like she's made it her mission to come for Palestine Action. But in the legislation that was passed through Parliament, it's not just Palestine Action that were mentioned, there's also two other groups. Why do you think Palestine Action was lumped together with those two groups?
Because I don't think any MP in their right mind would say, oh, maniac murder cult? No, let's not prescribe them. It was a very dirty trick that she did. She put us in with a neo-Nazi murder cult and a paramilitary group. And you can't separate us. In the legislation, you can't separate us. So even the Lords today can't say, well, let's look at these as individual cases. They can technically add or remove groups to it, but they can't separate that legislation. So the fact that she's put us all together, lumped all of these three groups together, who have very different ideologies and very different goals, is her way to ensure that prescribing Palestine Action goes through.
You mentioned, or you alluded to earlier, that Palestine Action doesn't have the kind of classic membership that you'd usually have to organizations. So how do you think they envision it working for them to prescribe this movement, which isn't a central organization with an address and directors?
I think this is where the vagueness of counterterrorism comes in, and the vagueness of counterterrorism legislation, and the way in which they can enact it. So if they believe that people are supporting an organization that even replicates Palestine Action, then they can use this notion of membership on them in that way. I have always found it quite a funny word that's come up in court again and again and again as I've been on trial or watched other people's trials, is they always come back to this notion of membership. No matter how many times lawyers make it very clear that this isn't a union, this isn't something where you have a card, this is a network of compassionate people. They always overlook that. They have always overlooked that. So for them, I believe that the definition of membership is very different to what we are able to understand it as. And this is the issue with this law, that the definitions are so loose. And that's how they can abuse that use of policy to no end.
Now, we've spoken today about the Filton 18 briefly and how terrorism legislation has been used against them. Mm-hmm. And even though that's currently ongoing, and it's been going on for quite some time, actions or direct actions still take place. So the threat of being prosecuted under these laws has not deterred some of the actioneers or activists. Does this government actually expect that proscribing Palestine Action will deter future actioneers?
Do they believe it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they do. One, consideration here is that they are very embarrassed by our popularity, and they can try and ban direct action, but essentially what they're doing is trying to scare people off doing it, right? But direct action, I mean, there's such a long history of it. The suffragettes would have been terrorists if this legislation existed during that time. You can't ban a people's way of enacting their commitment to a cause. And that's always going to come down to groups of people who do direct action, because they understand that writing to our MPs doesn't work. Signing petitions doesn't work, particularly not on an issue like this. All of these things, like walking slowly in a street on a Saturday, hasn't worked. So people will always turn to direct action. And one thing I can tell you is the vast majority of recruits in the past year have said, all of them, I am so tired of feeling helpless. I am so tired of writing to my MP and feeling this small and this incapable of enacting change. And so I need to do something that is more powerful than these solidarity marches. I need to know in myself that I did something, that I actually did an action that had a material outcome. You can't take that need away from people.
In terms of the solidarity marches, now I understand the kind of perspective that they're not going far enough, but don't these two kind of separate streams help each other in a way, or achieve in different ways, or inch closer to the same goal in different ways?
I believe in formation. I'm a big believer in formation, and that everybody finds their place in formation. And one way in which we really saw the compatibility of these two different modalities of resistance was last night, Wednesday, which is following the MPs voting in Parliament. There was a big demo that was called outside Parliament, and thousands of people turned up. Those thousands of people turned up, and whether they knew it or not, they were turning up to protect the movement as a whole. They were turning up to protect people they didn't know. They were turning up as a means of defense, and that does matter. I think for a lot of people, they come to direct action after they've done the marching, the campaigning to MPs, and once they've come exhausted by that. So it's not for me to say those things are entirely useless. They're not. They are important. When I travel and I hear people say, oh my goodness, in London, the hundreds of thousands of people we see in the street is so inspiring to us that it makes us make sure that we do our marches. Yeah, that's important. That's very important. I think it's very important for people in Palestine to see that amount of people come out. Don't get me wrong. But I do believe that a material outcome from what I've seen is born from doing direct action.
In terms of the will to do direct action, there are several groups that have popped up globally with the same name as yours, Palestine Action, one in the US, I think one in Tunisia as well. But it does seem that the Palestine Action here in the UK is the most active. Is there a reason for that?
We just existed the longest. Palestine Action UK started in 2020 and since then has worked around the clock non-stop. A lot of these other groups who have started, or all of these other groups who have started internationally, were born after October the 7th. And so they have been learning from the kind of catalogue of actions and the way in which Palestine Action UK has been enacting its resistance. So they've all learned from that. So we still have maintained the strongest position, if you like, because we have all of that experience behind us. And we have this reputation and we have more people coming on board. I do also believe that there's something about the British people in which they do recognise their very distinct role, given their proximity to the heart of empire. And it's very hard, I think, for people to live here knowing the blood that is dripping from their bank cards, from their shopping bags, from their fingertips consistently because of the history of the British Empire. And that people are really, really wanting to take responsibility and accountability for that by making sacrifices that need to be made.
Some might say that in the United States, the heart of the imperial core, they would have at least expected something a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that can come down to policing. In the US, they're very trigger-happy police. So I think they have to operate slightly differently. It's not to say that they're not present. It's not to say that they're not doing the work. But it is to say that they might not be able to do it in the same way. That's also not to say that our activists haven't been held at gunpoint by police too. That has also happened. But luckily, no shots have been fired here. Whereas it's much more common for shots to be fired in the US. So I completely understand what you're saying. I believe that the way that they can carry out their Palestine Action actions is to do it differently than the way that we do it, or we have done it.
It speaks to the different realities that people live under, really, because there's a lot of blame being put on the peoples of Egypt, for example, or Jordan, or even Palestinians in the West Bank for not doing their part. And those claims might be true to an extent, but the realities are that in those countries, the type of policing that exists and the types of kind of imprisonment that exists really limit the ways that people can maneuver, especially since most of the potential leaders from within those communities are either in the ground or in prison or exiled. I wonder if you have a comment on the global solidarity movement as a whole, and maybe in particular from the surrounding nations around Palestine.
Well, I think you're entirely correct in saying that there's very different experiences of what is possible in terms of resistance. I certainly wouldn't expect a Palestine Action to emerge in Egypt, because I know what the regime there acts like and feels like to live under. And Palestine Action because it was born in the UK, it was born in response to the way that the justice system works here. So we know that if actionists do a lock-on, that the police have to go through all of these health and safety bureaucratic measures before they can remove them. Whereas in other countries, they're not going to wait for a special team to be deployed to cut you out of that lock-on. They will just drag you away, you know? So we have used the bureaucracy of the UK against itself in that way, which isn't something that works in all of the countries in which we're mentioning here.
Returning to the protest that occurred on Wednesday in support of Palestine Action, or in opposition to the proscription of Palestine Action. As you mentioned, thousands of people turned up. The coalition that organizes the marches organized this protest. MPs such as Zara Sultana and I think Jeremy Corbyn as well spoke at the protest. For all those who turned up in support of Palestine Action on that day, what is your message to them?
I genuinely feel that we each carry one another's freedom inside of us, and that was very felt yesterday. Seeing the thousands of people turn up was very moving, and I would like to say that I'm grateful, but I also believe that is exactly what we should expect of each other. That we should expect of each other to turn up and to protect us, as we all do for one another, or ought to be doing for one another. But I do say thank you for all of those who are turning up, because I know that there are many who are afraid right now. It's very complicated, all of the rhetoric, because for some, they believe it's already illegal to talk about Palestine Action. And it's not. It's not quite yet illegal to talk about Palestine Action. It's not quite illegal yet to wear a t-shirt. It's not quite illegal yet to turn up to a march in your thousands. But many people still think that it is, which is debilitating. It could be debilitating. And yet these thousands of people, in the face of knowing the police brutality that's been happening in these past 2 weeks to people who have turned up to marches supporting Palestine Action, they came anyway. And I do have respect for that, and I do have admiration for that, really.
What would your advice be to those who support direct action moving forward if Palestine Action is in fact prescribed?
There will be myriad ways for people to keep supporting direct action and keep taking direct action. Yes, Palestine Action has led that in terms of direct action for Palestine in the UK. But I'm hoping that what we have done is given an example of how that can look. It doesn't have to function in the way that Palestine Action has. But people must keep supporting one another's rights to protest in these different modalities and to restrict the UK's ability to participate in this genocide and the continued ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
And finally, whilst the coverage of the prescription of Palestine Action and the chants by Bob Villan, for example, have gotten wall-to-wall coverage, they've been a bit of a distraction from what we have been talking about, or what we're fighting for, which is justice for the Palestinian people. So in that vein, what is your message to the Palestinian people?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Absolutely, it's been a distraction, and I hope that people don't turn their attention away, because what I have to say, and on behalf of Palestine Action, is that we will not abandon you. That Palestine Action has been how we have fulfilled the promise we make when we say the words "Free Palestine." That is a promise, that is not a slogan, and we have done everything we can to uphold it. And that promise is a part of us, and prescription isn't going to change that. Prescription isn't going to change our dedication to you as Palestinian people. It's not going to change our dedication to the liberation of Palestine from the Zionist entity. The colonial occupation must fall, one way or another. We remain shoulder to shoulder, with the Palestinian people, and we will overcome this so that we can stay beside you.
Luxx, thank you for that beautiful message, and thank you for all the work you do. And I hope that the proscription can be avoided. But if not, either way, we are proud of the work that Palestine Action has done. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.